like to begin with just a little trivia, if there's any trivia people here. But this Feast of the Transfiguration only comes on a Sunday every 6 years. I don't know why that's important to know that, but it's true. Also, this Transfiguration, narrated in the Gospel, is narrated by all four Gospels. Very few parts of the Bible do that. But this story of the Transfiguration narrated in all four of the Gospels. Also, normally this Gospel is read on the second Sunday of Lent every year. And so it's a Gospel that's certainly very, very important. So you can take that home and share that and sound brilliant, okay? Each of the evangelists in the Gospels talk about the call of Jesus to the apostles and disciples to come follow him. And then everything begins to happen quickly. The disciples, the apostles, leave their families and their jobs behind and follow Jesus. They left their comfort of familiar surroundings and they walked with Jesus into new and different places. They never really went far from their hometown, but with Jesus they did. They were challenged by new teachings of this dynamic preacher named Jesus. They were challenged by these new teachings, and they were exhilarated by the miracles they saw, that Jesus was curing sicknesses, he was raising the dead, he was doing so many important things, and that they themselves were given the power sometimes to cast out demons. And so things were really going quickly for them and exciting. And then Jesus had to ruin everything. Jesus had to ruin everything because just prior to this event, Jesus had announced to the disciples that I must go to Jerusalem and I must suffer greatly for the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and I must be killed. And so will you. That was tough news to swallow. Things are going great. Things are wonderful. And now he has to do that and say that. You can imagine this didn't go over very well with Peter nor the other apostles. When Peter expresses it, he says, God forbid, Lord, no such thing should ever happen to you. No such thing should happen to you. And so it's in that context, that announcement, that we have this gospel today. Because Jesus was a wise leader, and he knew that this news had caused concern among the apostles and disciples. He also knew that there would be many difficult times ahead as they began this final journey towards Jerusalem. And so Jesus decided it's time for a timeout. And he takes the apostles, he brings them up this Mount Tabor, and he gives them that vision of the divinity of Jesus. That even though I've told you all of this bad news, it's not going to be the end. That I am truly the Son of God. And it's at that moment that he begins to talk about that the voice comes from the Lord and says, this is my beloved Son. These words revealed in wonderful way that Jesus' connectedness to the Father. They speak of that intimate, unbreakable bond that exists between Jesus and the Father. So Jesus is God's beloved Son, and we who are baptized into Jesus are truly beloved daughters and sons as well. And so that voice is also speaking to us. It's giving to the apostles and it's giving to us an identity that we are sons and daughters of God. And so we participate in this intimate union that exists between the Father and the Son. And this is the good news that was revealed on Mount Tabor. This is the good news that I hope is proclaimed today at Our Lady of the Lake Parish, that we are sons and daughters, and that we must believe in that news and act on it. We must never forget our status, that we are his sons and daughters. If we see ourselves only, and we do this often, let's admit it, if we only see ourselves as sinners or as victims or as unlovable, as flawed or unworthy, then the power of the gospel gets to be lost. Do we sin? Are we flawed? Is there a sense that we are unworthy of the tremendous love that God showers us? Yeah, we know that. Of course it is. But despite all those flaws, despite all of that, we remain chosen and beloved children of God. It is only by claiming our identity that we find the power to turn away from sin, the power to heal our hearts, the power to claim the dignity that God has so frequently given us. We can go back because we're sons and daughters, and this Father will never abandon us. Richard Rohr, who's a wonderful spiritual writer, has written several little stories, and he tells one story about his own childhood. And he told about an elderly man that lived in the area, Mr. Brown, who was very protective of his property. He had apples, trees in his property, but he was kind of a grouchy man too. And so he built a fence around the yard to protect his apples. And he told all the children in the neighborhood in no uncertain terms, stay away from his apple orchard, because that's my prized possession, and it's not there for you to pick apples. One day, Richard and his friends, being the kids that they were, climbed over the fence on a dare and stole as many apples as they could from the orchard. But then Mr. Brown saw them, and he came after them. They all escaped except Richard. He was just one of those slow kids. And he got caught. And he was collared and he was dragged back to his home. Mr. Brown rang the doorbell. Richard's mom answered. Mr. Brown immediately demanded, "Your son stole apples from my yard and he must be punished." Mrs. Rohr calmly said, "Mr. Brown, I'm sorry. I told Richard many times to stay out of your yard. He has done what is wrong, and you can be sure that I will punish him." Mr. Brown was not satisfied. "What punishment will you give him? I want you to tell me." Again, Mrs. Rohr explained, "I will punish him. I will take care of it. Now, have a good day." Her blood pressure has gone up a little bit at this point. And Mr. Brown once again spoke, "Mrs. Rohr, I don't think you're taking this serious. You are forgetting that Richard did something that was wrong." Mrs. Rohr finally said, "Mr. Brown, I told you I'll take care of it. I will punish him, but I cannot see Richard as you do. You are forgetting that Richard is my son." Richard Rohr suggests that this is how God looks at you and I. God never forgets who we are, his beloved children. For all of our faults and failings, God continues to look at us with love. When the voice from heaven says, "Listen to him," we must never forget who we are. So when we become discouraged or when we find ourselves losing hope because of our faults, because of our inability to be patient or as generous as we'd like to be, because of our inclination to be judgmental of others, remember, God loves us with the same love that God loves Jesus. When things go wrong, when we cannot find a way out, when we are beginning to think God is punishing us, remember, God is not punishing us. God is about loving us with a love that never ends. And when we become overwhelmed with grief, with sickness, with an emptiness that will not let us go, we try to remember God's love for us is everlasting. We are not one among many people. Our dreams and our needs are always before God's face. Jesus himself assures us, you are God's favorite daughter, God's beloved son. Listen to him.